the dollar ceases to be a means of payment for us. It has lost all interest for us. And he said that the greenback is no better than candy wrappers.
At goldsilver.com, we have a price match guarantee, free shipping, and global storage options. Thanks for making goldsilver.com your bullion dealer.
Hi, this is Mike Maloney, and I'm joined by Adam Taggart once again. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. Just back from vacation. Very happy to be picking things back up with you.
Awesome. So a lot has happened since your vacation. What are the topics that we're going to be covering this time?
All right. Well, yeah, I'm digging through the recent news, and there's a great opinion piece here on Market Watch from Brent Arendt titled, "Russia Just Made a Case for Owning Gold and Nobody Noticed." There's some really pretty amazing comments here by Russian leaders, including Putin himself. Mike, I'm sure you've got opinions on this. What did you think about this?
Well, I had already seen the Putin piece, and my opinion is that everything that the U.S. has done with the sanctions and everything else is just shooting ourselves in our own feet. I'm surprised that we can walk at this point. We've really undermined the dollar's status as the future reserve currency of the world. There's countries all over the world that are no longer going to trust the dollar after this. And one of the things, when it says that, and nobody noticed, it's my job to notice, but I did not see the piece from Pavel Zavalny. I didn't see that. So that's what this article is mostly about. So what did you get from the article?
Well, same thing as you, which is, the U.S. right now is kind of its own worst enemy, but it's also gold's best friend these days, which is crazy after, decades of sort of trying to contain the gold price. The quote that really stood out from the article to me from Zavalny, who is the head of the Russian parliament, was the following. He said, if countries want to buy oil, gas, and other resources from Russia, it's happy to sell them to them. But they're demanding now, let them pay either in hard currency, and this is gold for us, he said, or pay it as is convenient for us. This is the national currency. So he's basically saying, hey, you can buy stuff from us either in rubles or in hard gold. Pretty striking. What do you think, Mike?
I think it's... I think that this is absolutely amazing. I've been predicting, since I wrote my book, and I, back then, nobody had ever written about the history and the changes of the world monetary system. And so since 2009, I started giving presentations on the death of the global dollar standard, which is what we're on right now. But it's interesting, this other quote from the article, right underneath the one that you just read, the dollar ceases to be a means of payment for us. It has lost all interest for us. And he said that the greenback is no better than candy wrappers.
That's like kicking the guy in the head once you've knocked him down.
Well, you know what, though? The more you study the history of money and currency, more importantly, because I study the history of money, gold and silver, and I made the distinction between money and currency years ago after reading this history, because all the ones that aren't money eventually go to zero. And you realize that all fiat currencies are really, in the long run, no better than candy wrappers.
Yeah, and we get sold the fact that gold has no practical uses, right? It's this barbarous relic, right? As former Fed Chair Bernanke once famously said. But look, people say, look, what can you do with gold? Well, you know what you can do with gold? You can buy oil, you can buy nickel, you can buy wheat. I mean, it's Russia is basically saying here, look, we're going to, re-recognize it as a major way for doing global trade.
Yeah, and as Charles de Gaulle said, that it's a form of payment that does not have the stamp of any particular country. It the US dollar is the US dollar, and the world uses it. And now the world is seeing that they can be held hostage because it's a US dollar. And so everything that's happening now is extremely interesting, but it's frightening to see how quickly things are unraveling.
Right, and that's usually how unravelings happen, right? They happen gradually and then all at once, right? That's sort of how decline, happens. I love that De Gaulle quote you mentioned, because Brent Arendt, the guy who wrote this piece in Market Watch, wrote something similar. I want to read here in just a second. And what I think is important about this is, Market Watch is a relatively mainstream media outlet, right? And we're finally beginning to see some of these, longstanding sort of truisms that have been expunged from the mainstream media for so long begin to creep back in. And I think that's a really important milestone here. So specifically what Brent said is, he said, I'm gold agnostic. I'm neither a fanatical believer or denier, but there is no question it has its uses. Gold is completely private. It is completely independent of the SWIFT or any other banking system. And despite the rise of cryptocurrencies, it remains the most widespread and viable global currency that is not controlled by any individual country. And the fact that these light bulbs are beginning to go on in the minds of more mainstream financial journalists, I think is really telling here, Mike, where we are in this story.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then, on top of that, one thing that also went under the radar of mainstream media, Wall Street Silver picked it up immediately, and a few other people. But Vladimir Putin recently said that the illegitimate freezing of some of the currency reserves of the Bank of Russia, so it doesn't matter whether it's the Bank of Russia, just that there is a world central bank in the central banking system that suddenly was frozen out of it and their assets seized. So the illegitimate freezing of some of the currency reserves of the Bank of Russia marks the end of the reliability of the so-called first-class assets. In fact, the US and the EU have defaulted on their obligations. Now everybody knows that financial reserves can simply be stolen. Many countries in the immediate future will begin to convert their paper and digital assets into real reserves of raw materials, land, food, and gold. And it's happening. And I'm sure this was a wake-up call for many, many countries around the world. And even as those countries that are not necessarily friends of the United States, as those countries start to convert to other assets, mostly gold, eventually you're going to see the countries that are friends of the United States follow suit. What do you think?
Well, I think that's exactly right. And as you've said for a long time, Mike, you got to size the collective size of all those different fiat currency markets against those markets of real things like gold, right? And, gold is much smaller than all the world global fiat currency. And so as that currency flows into gold, you should see the price of gold just skyrocket as that begins to happen here. Real quick, folks, if you are enjoying discussions like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. And Mike, I think your question there relates really well to the meme you have for the day, where, as we said, countries now have an even greater incentive to trade their excess dollars in for real assets. Do you want to talk about the meme?
Well, it's a great meme. It's been floating around for many years. Now you could put a Russian flag on the same side as China there. China was getting rid of their dollars and stocking up on gold, and so did Russia. And so this is just the future of the world. The West, gold has been flowing from west to east for decades now. And when the fiat currency pyramid comes tumbling down, what's going to be left and who has the most of it? That is the question. So I want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you, Adam, for hosting this.
Always a pleasure, Mike.